Good evening. My name is Joanne Rowe, and I'm going to take a few minutes and talk to you about my journey, my personal journey as an economist and higher ed education administrator. So, I want to first start by saying that I am old enough to have lived in segregation. And I say that humbly and with gratitude because it's a part of my story in who and why I became an economist. I remember when Martin Luther King was shot. I remember when John F. Kennedy was shot. And I remember when Robert Kennedy was shot and Malcolm X and all of some of the great leaders of our civil rights area. And it had a profound impact on me. And when I say that, I say that I was in a transition period where the social thought was to transform from a society which was uh, deeply rooted in discrimination and segregation to one of integration. And I remember when my class was the first to integrate the white schools, and I'm from Miami, Florida, and I remember vividly the first couple of years we were there, it was very tough. I remember the race riots, and I remember riots on my high school campus. And so those kinds of experiences have a profound way of shaping who you are. I remember I took American history and I took economics, and I so enjoyed economics. But the books I read, the stories I heard, and everything was not about me. It was about someone else. And so I personally never thought a little Black girl from Richmond Heights would be an economist. That wasn't my thought. I was going to go into business so that I could earn my living in business. I remember I went to the University of Miami. I was a Upward Bound student, so that lets you know my story. I'm the first in my family to have gone to college, and so there was no one before me to help shape. But my parents and my grandparents, um, they really wanted an education for us, and so I digress a little bit from that part of the story to let you know from where I come from. My great grandmother was from Cat Island. My father and mother both lived in the U.S. and were born in the U.S., but basically a lot of their growing up was in the islands. And so my great grandmother couldn't read or write, but she had vision. She was a businesswoman. She had two or three businesses and property and assets. So I let you know that I come from a humble beginning, and I almost failed in my first year in high school. And I remembered because I didn't understand why the white children had cars and other things that even the deacons in my church didn't have. And so I was terribly confused. And then I went to the University of Miami. I just backtracked a little bit. And the very first year I was there, you know, there might have been one or two classes with Black students before me, but we were integrating the university as well. And I saw Professor Hollis Price. He was the first Black professor in the School of Business hired by the University of Miami, and he happened to be an economist. And so I went up to Professor Price and I was like, I didn't know Black people could be economists. Wow. And I took literally every course that I could take that he offered, and I bypassed some of the other courses just so that I could hear a Black person talk about economics. And my interest has always been, and it still remains today in the research and the work that I do, why do so few people have so much and so many have so little? And that has always perplexed me through my professional and personal life. And so I shared with Professor Price that I would like more training. And he wrote some references for me. And I got into another school. It was in Illinois somewhere. And there, I didn't have Black economists, but I was able to fulfill my love and my interest in this journey for the discipline. Why? Because this is a discipline that gives you both quantitative and qualitative skills to analyze both social, business, and worldwide problems. And so I just love the broad reach that the discipline had. And, while I enjoyed my 1 year, and it was in the Midwest, and I tell you, I'm from Miami, Florida, I could not take that cold. And I had several, and I took the exams, and I had several universities recruit me with scholarships for after the master's program. I think SUNY was one, in another school, and Howard. And I remember talking with my parents about the options. As I mentioned, no one in my family had been away to college. And my dad was the one that says, there is no other place like Howard. You will be going to Howard. And I remember the journey. It was like a family field trip. My youngest sister, we're a family of six, I even have dozen. My youngest sister was with us. My youngest brother, my dad, my mom, they all drove up. We found an apartment for me. My dad bought the furniture. He was the proudest he had ever been. And so, of that for our family. So I tell you all that to know that this was not just for me. This was for our family. And I share that with you because I was 21 when I came into the Howard program, and I was tired. I had been in school round the clock. I did my first degree in 3 years, my second degree in 1 year, and I was tired. And so I did my first year. The classes were never a problem. I loved being in the classrooms, and then I left. During 1 year, I was at the World Bank, and I had met one of my friends at Howard, friends, and I married him. And he happened to be from Tanzania, East Africa, and I left with my husband. But he promised that proud father of mine that if he allowed me to go, that he would send me back to complete my education, because my dad was heartbroken. He was like, well, can't you finish first? And then my husband said, well, you don't just leave a new wife. And so I went to Tanzania. I was there for a couple of years. We had my daughter, and then he, true to his promise, he allowed me to come back. And I will tell you, one of the saving grace is the faculty at Howard. If it wasn't for the faculty, I don't think I would have come back. Dr. Houchins, from where he was, God bless his soul, rest his soul, he would write me while I was in Tanzania, and he said, come back, I'll make sure everything is okay. Because I was always on scholarship. It's not that I could come back. And so when I got back, Professor Houchins was true to his words. And the journey continued. I can tell you, I love being in the classroom. I always loved being in the classroom. However, the comprehensive were a challenge, but I learned how to test at Howard. I learned a lot of critical thinking. I remember asking Dr. Houchins, because I took labor economics, and one of my specialties while I was at Howard was urban economics and human resources. And I loved labor economics, and he was the instructor for labor economics. And I would ask him, why do you make us read so much, Dr. Houchins? I've been to the white schools. I've been to, I would take courses at George Washington and some of the other places around Washington. And quite candidly, they were not as difficult in my mind in the courses I took. And I'm not saying that's now, but as what I was going through at Howard. And, Dr. Houchins looked at me with empathy and caring in his eyes. And he says, the books weren't written for us. The books weren't written by us. And so one day you may have to rewrite the books, and you can't rewrite a book if you don't know what's in it. And so therein was my training. It was rough. It was tough. I could tell you, I told you I got 1 degree in 3 years, another one. It took me almost 9 years to get that degree out of Howard. And I will tell you the most challenging part was the research part, and doing the dissertation to the degree of satisfaction of my faculty. While I was there, I opened a business. I worked full-time for the federal government in several different places, Department of HUD, FCC, and the Defense Department. So I kept working while I was going through, and it just was not working. And it is my story. And I will tell you, Dr. Hodges is the one that told me this. He said, you know, they don't believe that you could earn your dissertation, work a full-time job, and work a business. Now, young people, this is just my story. I wanted it bad enough. I told you it wasn't just about me. My whole family had made sacrifices. My daughter, my husband, my mother, my father. And so I did what I believe it took. I quit my good full-time federal job. I closed down my art gallery in Adams Morgan that had been running for 5 or 6 years, was one of the better well-known galleries in the area. And I focused just on that dissertation. And, you know, what's important, and this was a lesson to me, it wasn't important that I do the treatise of the world and have the best book of the world. What was important to me and my family was that I finished. And so after I shut everything down in a matter of, you know, months, it wasn't years, we were able to go to defense. And I said, we, that's a big we. Dr. Hodges was right there with me. And he said, don't be afraid. He said, you know more about this subject than anybody else in the room. And I will tell you, that's what Howard gave me, that I took into my professional work. It is the courage and the confidence to know that you can, and you are just as good. And I will tell you, in most of the jobs I've been, I have been better than others. And that, for me, was a gift, because it was someone who knew, showing me the way where I didn't have anyone showing me the way before. And if my honest story is, I didn't think of going into education, because at that point in time, I had been out for a long time and I wanted to earn a return on my investment. So I thought the way out, and immediately when I graduated in 1984, I went to work for IBM. They were hiring. And they, you know, I done work in the Defense Department, and as a operations research analyst. And the skill sets that I had, I was forecasting millions of instructions per second, if you know what that means, that's MIPS. The beauty of the work that I was able to do from the World Bank to the Defense Department is forecasting. Forecasting at World Bank was forecasting the demand for education in developing countries. And so the tool set that I got would allow me to use those transferable skills in several different industries. And I went in IBM thinking, well, this is the corporate world. This will be my place. And I will tell you, I did enjoy some of the work. We moved around a lot. We did a lot of different things. And there was a lot of training. And I'll just tell this for you who are beginning your career. Big government, that would be the federal government and other governments, it's good for training because you get to train on someone else's dime. Big corporations is good for training because you get to train on their dime. And what's most important is you learn how to work in a team and you learn how to work with others. I will tell you that the world's problems are big enough now and more complex now, that one person can't solve a problem by themselves. And so if all you learn how to do while you're going through the process is the work that you can do, you're not as of value as someone who understands the dynamics and the ability to work with teams. And so that's what I got out of my federal government employment and my IBM corporate employment. I did everything from forecasting MIPS to build buildings in Poughkeepsie, to selling large scale systems and applications to the Federal Reserve Board right there in Washington, D.C. So it's a very diverse career. And I personally like moving around. I like new experiences. And so while you're moving around in the government, it doesn't look like you are unstable because you're working all within the federal government. And the same thing with big corporations. I must have moved 6 or 7 times in a 10-year career at IBM. And IBM is known for moving its people and its resources to where they want. So my time is winding down, and I don't want you to think as an economist, I was only working in the federal government and corporate, because where I have found my real joy and my real passion is in higher ed. My last assignment at IBM was the IBM visiting professor to Hampton University. And I tell you, it changed my life. That is where I understood that because I had both the theoretical and the practical experience, there were some things that I could bring to my students that others couldn't. I kept watching their eyes when a complex concept like elasticity, price elasticity, and I could give it an experience that I had either in IBM or the federal government, and I would see the aha moment, and that, my friends, was better than a paycheck. And so I didn't know if I wanted to be in higher ed administration or to go the professorial route, because I taught both, but I had more experience as a manager and more experience as an administrator. And so I went away to Harvard for a year in their higher ed administration program, and really made the decision that when I went back to higher ed, and which was a year or so later, that I would go in as an administrator. And I went back to Hampton. I was the chairman of economics, information systems, and entrepreneurship. And so those three themes I have carried throughout my career. And I don't want to go into all of those different places that I've been, because I've been through a lot of different places, but carrying the same theme, always looking to help those who are underserved. Most of the institutions I have worked in, even in higher ed, have been those who focus on the protected classes. And the protected classes are minority, women, those who are aged, the veterans. And all of my research has been in those areas. And so we're coming to the end of my time. And I can tell you that now I'm the Dean of the School of Business at Medgar Evers College, City University of New York. However, in my career, I have been a chief academic officer at 2 institutions, a dean of business at one other institution, and a president for a brief time at another institution. So I've had a varied career, but I will tell you at the very base is the passion for learning and helping others. The way that, when you go across the graduation stage, and I've been on many stages, is one of my happiest times. And if you are a part of the success and the dreams that come true for those students, it's a life-changing feeling. And so I can tell you on the tail end of my work, I've started doing more research and collaborating with others around the world. I actually, within the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, have been to Thailand, China, Pakistan, Kenya 3 times, Tanzania, London, France, Chile, Poland, a lot of different countries. And I speak on the future of work and entrepreneurship for the underserved. We just produced our first book with collaborators from professors across the world. Last year, it's the future of work and entrepreneurship for the underserved. A publisher came to me and asked me to continue the work. And so this summer, we will be producing another book called Sustainability and the Future of Work for the Underserved. And so that is part of my story. I have, shared with you my humble beginnings, tell you where I am now. And the most important thing that has been driving my career is desire to help change the world, and so can you. Thank you, and I appreciate this brief time with me. Bye-bye, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.